Fáilte. Welcome to the Village Oak Tree Stories and Poetry. I'm Terrance Ó Domhnaill, your Irish scéalaí, back with more stories and poems from authors around the world. I know it's been a bit since I've read any stories, so I've collected several today, this first day of 2025. For today's show, I have another episode of the Grave Diggers of Orpheus, chapter 14. The third part of Liora's story, a story from a Substack writer about a wizard king, a fictional story about a special cat, a very short science fiction story about love and spaceships, and two poems. So gather around once more and let me read to you as we sit together someplace warm. So the first story we have is The Grave Diggers of Orpheus, chapter 14, from Catherine Elaine. So if anybody remembers where we were before, these guys went out into the red mist, crashed the ship a little bit, and now they're going to bury their dead. And this is where we pick up the story. Joe had said he wanted to be cremated after death, and Derek respected his last will. The gravedigger crew stood around his dead body in the wide open coffin to pay their respects. Afterward, the whole crew, Doc, Liz, Sophie, and baby Anouk, gathered in Vulture's canteen for a meal to honor Joe's memory. The meal was humble, and Derek realized nothing better lay ahead. They were stranded in a mist-covered territory open to warfare. Even though the ghouls would not dare to fly through the red mist, they still shot missiles from afar. The inhabitants of Vulture heard them hit the ground and explode not far ahead. The solar batteries provided the Vulture with heating and hot water. The latter they could get using a drill to dig a well. There was plenty of water underneath the red core of Orpheus' surface. The food was a problem. They would run out of it soon. Derek said a couple of words to honor Joe before his voice broke down in the constant buzzing white noise of the Vulture. The gravediggers raised their glasses. None of them were good with pretty words. The cremation didn't take long. Despite the possible dangers of the unknown territory, the gravediggers set out into the red mist to spread Joe's ashes. Better do it while we can. Who knows when them ghouls will blow us up, they pondered. Ashes to ashes, Derek gritted his teeth, not to break down sobbing in front of his crew, dust to dust. He poured the gray substance out of the small container. It weaved with the gentle winds and the sparkling red mist until it landed gracefully on the sand. From the red sands of Orpheus he came, and to them he returned, said Derek, with a lonely tear escaping his eye. Well said, Cap. Jimmy tapped him on the shoulder. The boys were right, Derek thought. Whilst going to the disinfection shower, they were a sitting target. Any minute could bring them death. The cool chill of hopelessness crept up his spine. As usual, Captain was the last one to hit the shower, after he'd taken care of maintenance issues of Vulture in standstill mode. Sophie was waiting by the showers. Doc Liz is watching Anouk. We need to talk. Derek stood silently looking into her eyes. I have my connections with the rebel forces. They're not as bad as you think. They could help us if we reached them before the ghouls blow us up, Derek paused. The rebel forces left you to die. Anouk's father is an active rebel. He protected me until one day he was just gone without an explanation. I would never leave you to die, even though we might die any minute, Sophie said, and moved closer to embrace him. I haven't been disinfected, he stepped back. The shower door swooshed open. I know, she embraced him, pushing both of them into the shower with the door closing behind them. So, how are they going to get out of this? We'll have to wait till the next chapter. So my next story is the third part of Liora's story, Cast into Darkness. It's in the trees. It's coming. This is from Mitch. When I was a child running in the night, afraid of what might be, hiding in the dark, hiding in the street, and of what was following me. Kate Bush. Matilda groaned. Her eyes fluttered, rolled back until only whites threaded with fine red veins showed. Her body jerked in tiny spasms. Mom, Liora cradled her head in her lap. Mom, wake up. Please, wake up. Her mother's voice rose, speaking words Liora couldn't quite understand. Whispers and hisses, breeze sounds and croaking growls. The air grew cold, colder still. Leora's fingers stiffened as she held her mother's twitching body. Mist, cold and white, wreathed from Mom's contorted face, puffing from her mouth and nose. Mom's shivering grew worse. Her heels beat the dirt floor, her dress tangled in the mat. Something broke above them, something heavy. A rafter? It cracked like a thunderclap and shook the air. The ground shifted uneasily. Tiny cracks appeared in dirt like mouths. "Mom, please, Mom." Leora's gaze rocketed around the tiny room. What was happening? Dried herbs on the table ruffled as if in a high wind. Groaning sounds came from the walls, the roof. She looked up in horror, her heart hammering in her chest. The room seemed to grow just a tiny bit bigger. Light fingered in through the thatch. Dust and bits of straw fell around her. The air changed again. She smelt pine and grass and musk, as if a large beast nested nearby. The walls around her thinned, faded. She could see right through them. In the village, people gathered. Men trudged toward the commons, their faces grim. Ulrich gestured. His hand pointed to their house. Beyond the village, the forest opened out like a carpet of soft green. Far in the distance, hazy mountains sawed at the sky. In a moment, the ground tilted, and Leora's gaze swept high up into the clouds. She looked down in terror. A rabbit hopped in a thin brush next to a twisting silvery stream. She had never been that far into the forest before. Her heart beat in her chest, strong and fast. Faster now as she tipped her body down. Air rushed past her wings. As she fell, it roared through her ears like a giant. Then she was the rabbit, chewing a blade of grass. It was quiet on the ground. Behind her, the stream bubbled across mossy rocks, rippling in tinkling water. Peaceful. Her stomach pleasantly full. Soon she would return to the warmth of the warren. Liora screamed, her thin voice thin and quavering. "God above, have pity." The earth suddenly tilted again, and she stretched deep into the ground. Her roots tangled in the stones, in the soil. She sensed earthworms wriggle around her. The smell of the dank and dark filled her nostrils. Nearby, a mole dug in fits and starts, the sound as familiar as a birdsong. And then Liora heard the voices again, thousands of them, whispering through the windless leaves. Her own voice rose to meet them, and they welcomed her. A chorus of trees, their arms reaching for hers, and their strength flowing into her body as cold and as deep as a drink from a mountain stream. Something changed. Something in her body opened its eyes. Something awoke. Without warning, everything stopped as suddenly as it began. Liora found herself on the floor, her mom cradled in her arms. Her mother stirred. "Liora," her voice unsteady, trembling. "Mom, thank heaven you're back. Thank heaven, thank heaven." "Liora, you're not safe here. If," Leora's mother drew a ragged breath, "if the forest claims you, you'll become wild. They won't understand." Leora's eyes filled with tears. "Ma'am, all I care about is you. Are you okay, ma'am?" She stroked her mother's brow gently, her heart still slamming in her chest, her thoughts whirling and tangling and making no sense. Matilda reached up a trembling hand, lay it on Leora's face. "You're a wildling, my child, half in, half out. The forest wants you. I want you. I hoped you were spared." Liora shook her head. "I don't understand, ma'am. We're but women. 'Tis nothing to fear from us, is there?" Footsteps tramped up the path to the door, heavy, strong. The latch rattled in the door for a moment, then the door pushed inward. Framed against the light, a man leaned in. He was young, the weight of his beard yet to fill in the strong line of his jaw. His gray eyes were wide and concerned as he whispered into the stillness of the room. "Miladies," he said, his voice unexpectedly resonant, "it's best we go before the elders come with the reeve." Leora's breath caught in her throat. She'd seen him before. He was the king's bard, Swafford. Her mom nodded. "Swaffy, help us up. Leora's been called. There's no telling what the foolish elders will do." The bard paused. He looked at Liora for a long moment. "She's already changing, Matilda. Look." As Matilda looked, Leora's wild hair lifted on its own accord, framed her delicate face, and turned wispy curlicues around her ears. "We're in trouble now," he said. He was right. Okay. Well, I hope he comes out with another one. So now, my next story is called The Wizard King. And it's by a writer, I think he lives in England. His name is Red Oscar. You were never satisfied with your lot, Sarah said. She had grown old in the years Hesh had been away, yet he had not, and to him it felt like his sister had aged 30 years overnight. And you were always content with too little, Hesh said. The stool was hard and splintered, the table stained with old blood from butchery and surgery. He considered asking whose it was, but that was mere conversation, an excuse to keep talking, and that was not why he was here. You were miserable, and you're still miserable, even as you sit there looking no different than the day you left. How is that possible? Sarah grimaced. She could smell something foul about Hesh, but stopped short of uttering her suspicions. Instead, she reached for the kettle and poured another cup of nettle tea. She added a lick of honey to the clay cup. Yes, well, better die rich and miserable than poor and miserable. He clapped once, and his own cup filled itself with wine from his cellar, 400 miles away. Sarah hissed at his display. Vile. You won't think it vile when I shower you and your family with gold. I don't want your gold. And besides, what am I to do with gold? All a bit of coin does is make someone a target on the roads. Sarah sank into the rocking chair, nursing her nettle tea. Suit yourself. I'm sure your man won't refuse my offer. He will, she said after a pause. Hesh smiled tightly and sipped his wine. A Talavar 208, a cup of which cost more than the cottage Sarah lived in. Where's your man and the children? Out hunting. And don't think you'll be here to see them. Not a chance I'm allowing a damn magician anywhere near my children, even if you are my brother. Sarah cast daggers across the room, though they were far less effective than Hesh's own. Hesh sat on an old stool he remembered their father constructing back before Sarah was born, and considered the stones of the cottage cut and placed by a distant ancestor. He rose. If that is your wish, and headed out like he had 30 years ago. Hesh leaned on his staff, the brilliant white crystal shimmering with gold-like stars in the sky. The remnants of his family cottage lay before him, the old stones laden with moss, the roof timbers had long since rotten and collapsed. The gravestones to the side had all split and cracked in the many, many winters left untouched. He strolled over to find his sisters, but none of the words had survived the centuries. He pinched his nose, trying to count the years since his last conversation with Sarah, but it was like trying to catch the morning mist. The gravestones were rough and damp, the ivy thick over the stones. He wondered who'd carved them, and if the last of his family to die had ever had one erected, if they'd even been buried themselves. It had taken a day of argument with the Crown's Guard to be here alone, foolish warnings about bandits or assassins or wild beasts. He was Hesh the Undying, conqueror, commander of the elements, wizard king. No two-bit rogue would have a chance against him. He stepped over the threshold into his childhood home, his sister's home, his grandparents' home, but all there was were weeds and animal dens. Any trinkets had long been pilfered or rotten away. He had not intended to visit the cottage, not again, but his feet had taken him there of their own accord and away from his intended destination. Perhaps it was for the best. There was a crunch of dry sticks to his right. A rustle of leaves sounded behind him. Hesh backed out of the ruined cottage to see 3 men surrounding him. 2 were dressed in little more than rags and wielding hatchets. The third wore a clean tunic and a castle-forged sword. Surrender the staff, old man, the swordman gnashed. Old, Hesh frowned. The 2 in rags sniggered. The larger of the 2 took a step closer. You look like you have a bit of money on you, too. Leave that. The swordsman pointed to the ground with his sword. I think not, Hesh said. You don't have a weapon. I don't need one. The swordsman laughed. Kill him. The larger of the 2 ragmen charged, and with 3 steps burnt into flame. The crystal on Hesh's staff glowed orange. With a swish of his staff, the other ragman crumbled into ash and cinders, leaving only the swordsman. Damn vagrants, Hesh hissed, and sent a crackle of lightning coursing towards the last of his assailants. The swordsman fell, a blackened husk of a man, his molten sword starting a small fire on the forest floor. It had been many years since Hesh had had to use such crude manners. A part of him had missed it, but another felt the gnawing exhaustion of sameness. Such power had built his kingdom, yet still he yearned for more. Ever since he was a boy, he wanted more food, more strength, more day, more coin, more power, all that and more. He'd acquired, yet still it was his sister had said all those centuries ago. Hesh was never satisfied with his lot. There was nothing for him amongst the crumbling stone and crawling ivy. That life, his prior life, was dead along with his sister, his nieces and nephews, and whoever they begat, and them, and them, and them, for however long it had been. He wondered why the cottage had been abandoned, but then he remembered a nighttime tale his father would tell of how one of his ancestors built the cottage after fleeing some disaster. Perhaps a disaster, a fire, brigands, a blight had washed through and driven his sister progeny away. Either way, there was nothing for him amidst the stones. Hesh headed into the woods behind his old home. He did not think of where he was going, though his feet took him there anyway. Those woods he played in as a boy, laying traps for squirrels, and later hunted deer, refused change. New trees sprouted from acorns and spinning seeds. Old trees withered or fell in storms. But the wood remained, wild and calm, chaotic and serene. Hesh had changed, and he had not. The Wizard King, once a nameless boy from nowhere of note, ruled the world with unrivaled strength and unparalleled knowledge. A timeless king for a timeless empire. Yet still the thirst for more gnawed him. Every sage from the archipelagos of the east to the deserts of the west, to the mountain tops of the north and the unending frost of the south, had told him the same. You are the carrier of a curse, Wizard King, the curse of the gods. Only in his 350th year did he understand, yet it took many more centuries to act. Soon, he found himself on the path he had trodden all those years ago. The path had not changed. No new trees grew upon it. The roots that crisscrossed then did so now, and the same blackberry bushes lined the path, flowering evermore. Such a simple thing, a blackberry bush. Hesh had always expected something grander, something more delicate. Moth orchids or rose bushes. At a demonstration of skill, but then such plants deep in the trees would only attract attention. He walked on. Hesh had gone beyond the point of return. His destination had been elsewhere, another mage shutting themselves off from the world like so many others since Hesh's rise. If the sages knew he was cursed, perhaps the mages could remove it, for it was no curse of flesh, no curse of mind, no disease to be expunged, or rot to be cut out. It was deeper. He understood that much. Yet he trod a path he had not trod since before, when he was just a nameless boy with just too much ambition. Hesh commanded the elements, fire, earth, air, water, and all they beget. He could scry the firmament, beckon the winds to blow, the droughts to cease, the sun to dim. 1,000 legions awaited his command, and a legion of wives served his whims. And yet he wanted more. That was his curse. Hesh walked on, and when he lifted his head, he knew he had arrived. Before him stood a cottage, the same that had stood so long ago, with the pale gray stone and freshly yellowed thatch. Steam rose from the chimney in regular black gouts, and a woman's humming echoed through the shuttered windows. Garlic and thyme grew against the walls while chickens pecked the earth. Hesh strode to the door and knocked twice. "Come in," a cheery young woman called. Hesh twisted the wrought iron knob, and the door opened in a silent arc. "You know the rules. Fetch me something," the woman smiled, her plush lips painted black. Hesh stepped away and searched for the chicken hut. There he found 3 eggs and brought them back to the cottage. "Set them in the bowl above the poultices," the woman poked at fire in her stove. Sparks flared as she added a new log. The iron door slammed shut as she set a kettle on the stove. "I take it you want for meat and something more?" A coy smile crossed her lips. Her eyes were as he remembered, one bluish-gray, the other red speckled with yellow. Thick curls of shimmering black still tumbled over her shoulders. "You haven't aged," Hesh said. "Nor have you, from a certain time, that is." She sat in a rocking chair. Balls of undyed wool sat in a basket to her left, while her right were sacks of feathers and down. She gestured for Hesh to sit. Hesh perched himself on the stool before the stove, the heat making his skin prickle. "I have a curse. I would like you to remove it." The Wizard King stared at the stone slab floor. "What is the curse?" She leaned back, forming a triangle with her hands. She viewed him through the triangle with her red eyes speckled yellow. "The curse of always wanting more," Hesh said. "That is not your curse. That is not your curse at all. That is merely your nature. I ask again, what is your curse?" Hesh hesitated. For the first time in an age, he had no idea what to say. Had the sages been wrong? Did he not carry the curse of the gods? Cursed to always want more power, more sacrifice, more worshippers, more world? It is the curse of the gods. But you are no god. You are a man, a very powerful man, but still a man. I am undying. That does not make one a god. Do you remember when you first sat there? Hash did, but he failed to see why that mattered. What has that got to do with this? The woman cocked her head to one side and regarded him as one would a babe trying to grab a doll. All had knowledge and yet no wisdom. I will not be mocked, Hash rose. The stool crashed to the stone behind him. Lightning crackled in his palm. The woman rose a finger, and the lightning dissipated. The kettle's boiled. Be a dear and pour me a cup. Hash clenched and unclenched his jaw, but try as he might, he could not summon the elements. He could not even channel a drop of unaspected magic. The kettle screeched like his rage, and he poured it out into her cup and then into his. The kettle quietened, and Hash set the stool upright and sat down after passing her the cup. Thank you. She set the cup on the low table at her side. She leaned forward, her strange eyes alluring him as they had long ago. I granted you that power, boy. I did not gift it to you. Damn your subtlety of words. Such things did not matter to Hash for longer than he could remember. Did such things matter to sages? He had to conclude that they did. What is the curse of the gods? Immortality. Hash did not understand. Such things are not a curse to the gods. Immortality is their nature, but it is not your nature. But you are immortal. She smiled, but said nothing on the subject. I never asked to be immortal, Hash remembered. It had been so long he had forgotten the first and only time he had visited this woman. No, you didn't, she smiled lustfully. The woman crossed her thin legs and began to rock. The day, that fateful day, flooded back into Hash's mind. The steps he took, the words he said, the 3 eggs he had collected for her that time, too, all of it. His father had been killed on the road for a scant amount of coin he'd made at market selling furs. Sarah was too young to understand, and Hash too young to do anything about it, yet stupid enough to think otherwise. He'd been beaten up by the same men, but even brigands knew not to kill children, so Hash limped home, beaten and embarrassed. The worst things a boy could be. But he did not return home, instead headed into the woods, leaving his mother to worry, not that he thought of her then, selfish as he was. He found a cottage in the woods and sat with the beautiful woman who lived there, and he asked for the power to control fire, to summon the winds, to quell the oceans, to raise the mountains, and she had given it to him. You named a price, Hash said. I did. I paid it. Why am I now cursed? You are not cursed, not truly. You are hollow. Hash did not understand. I asked for your nature, and you gave it willingly. Then why do I still yearn for more? You said that was my nature. Yes, I did. But I did not want that part of your nature. Hash did not understand. The woman laughed at his silence. Tell me, what is it you desire? Hash held his tongue from spitting the obvious answer circling his mind. For the first time in a long time, he truly thought about what he wanted, and after enough time that his tea had cooled, he said, Control. And the woman nodded. And how do you get control? With power, domination. The woman shook her head. You came to me as a boy, wounded in flesh and pride, and asked for power. Any boy in your position would. It is understandable. To set the wrongs, right requires strength of arm and a will of iron. Power over the elements, no less, provides both amply. Your greed is your nature, and that fault is mastered another way. Tell me, in that moment as a boy, when you sat before me, what did you want to control? I wanted to bring my father back, and failing that, destroy the brigands who killed him. Did you? I did neither. Death cannot be undone, and the brigands evaded me in my youth, and by the time I could find them, they were long dead. Not even I can grant you the power over life and death, not truly, but, the woman shook her head, your immortality is an echo of something else, a sign of your misplacement. You are not what you are meant to be. I am what I made myself, with the power I granted you, over a world that has yet to figure out how to cast you aside. I control the world. It is mine. Hess was shouting again, reaching for the flames that evaded his grasp. You understand nothing, woman hissed. She leaned forward, her red eyes speckled yellow, flaring for a moment. You lack all the qualities of the ancients. A child with a match thinking he can burn down the forest. A fool. You spoke to the sages of the world and learned nothing. You spoke to the mages and learned nothing. You have lived for nigh on 1,000 years and have learned nothing. 1,000 more will do you no good. Hash felt some essence of himself drain out of him. He faltered and fell backwards off the stool, and arched his back in pain as he landed. An ache plagued his body. His hands were not his own. His vision blurred, and when he stood, his clothing hung loose and was covered in gray hairs. "What have you done?" "I've taken back what I granted, and I've returned what you paid." Hesh summoned the lightning, but nothing came. He struggled to his feet and advanced on the woman, but his legs did not move as they should. Hesh stumbled to land at her feet. "I don't want it back. I want power." His voice was hoarse. "And what has power given you? Happiness, belonging, acceptance, virtue, discipline? It has given you none of those things." "I didn't need them with control over the elements." Hesh peered up at the beautiful woman with his rheumy eyes, clouded and blurred with age. "And that is what you lost." "I don't understand." Hesh's vision darkened as his skin began to flake. There was nothing beneath it, a void. He caught a mote of his flaking skin, and it smudged like ash in his fingers. He groaned one last time and collapsed into dust. Your kind never do. All right, so now I'm going to take a little break here, listen to my little advert, and when I come back, I will bring you the rest of what I got for you. During this break, I wish to ask for a donation of any amount to help me keep this podcast going. I'm fine with whatever you can afford, using whatever currency you want. I've set up a donation tab on the Crown of Bihar Stories and Poetry webpage at rss.com and a donation page on my website at www.crownofbihar.com using PayPal for your security. Don't worry about the exchange rates, as PayPal takes care of that for us. If you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know in your social circles, as the writers I showcase in this podcast deserve all the exposure they can get. I created this podcast for them because I love to read their work, and I believe it should be shared with the whole world. Now I want to explain how to find my website. Since this show is audio only, just write down the website name from the podcast image showing here and search for it. Visitors finding the website for the first time will reach the welcome page to learn a little bit about what's inside. You'll see the homepage link at the bottom of the page. Click on it if you wish to enter my world. Once on the homepage, you'll see the menu bar at the top where there are links to the pages in the website. Feel free to look around all you want. If you should happen to buy one of my books, all the better. Thank you for your support. Welcome back. Now, my next story is about a cat. It's entitled The Dream Walker. Night after night, I walk through dreams to help hearts remember what minds cannot, by Andrew Rupert Crocker. And he published this in the Crake and Lore in Medium.com. Humans believe cats have 9 lives, but what I have is a special gift. They call me Luna. By day, I'm the designated therapy cat at Shady Oaks Memory Care Center. They even gave me a pretty pink collar with a little white tag that states simply, Therapy Cat. But at night, after the day staff heads home and the fluorescent lights dim, I become something else. I learned about my gift shortly after arriving at Shady Oaks. It first happened with Mrs. Eleanor Wiseman in room 214. When her hands found my fur in the darkness, they trembled. These were hands that had once created quilts for every new baby in her family. As she stroked me, I felt this power build inside of me, and suddenly I was walking through her remembrances. In one, she sat quietly in a rocking chair with a half-finished quilt draped across her lap. Fabric squares surrounded her, some arranged in patterns, others scattered like fallen leaves. "The yellow dress," she murmured, picking up a faded square. "Sarah wore this. No, Mary. Was it Mary's?" Her fingers traced a pattern. "Someone small, someone who loved yellow. I can't. I pressed my body closer, and the memories became a torrent. Little Sarah, age 3, twirling and dancing in a yellow sundress in the bright sunshine. Eventually, when she outgrew it, Eleanor carefully stored the dress, knowing its fabric would someday tell a story one of her quilts. The next morning, when Sarah came for her weekly visit, Eleanor's eyes focused on her yellow blouse. "You always loved yellow," she said softly, "just like that little dress you used to dance in when you were little." Sarah cried, and the nurses called it a good day. I moved through the dreams of each resident. Maria Svensson's room smells of peppermint and old books. She taught 3rd grade for 30 years, But now her English comes and goes like a badly tuned radio. Tonight she's restless. Barnin, she mutters. They need their story. Charlotte, Spindlin. In her dream, she sits on a stool in front of her class. The book in her hands keeps changing. Sometimes it's in English, sometimes Swedish. I walk through this dream and find the story she's trying to remember. When I return to the present, I rest my paw on her hand. The next day, she tells her great-granddaughter about a spider who saved a pig. The words come out tangled between the two languages, but that doesn't matter. Love needs no translations. Dr. Thomas Green's dreams are harder to navigate. His hands, which once performed the most delicate of heart surgeries, now fumble with shirt buttons. In his dreams, he's always searching. Have you seen he asked the nurses. No, I need to find, there was something, someone. I wish I could restore what his mind has lost, but when I walk through his memories, I find moments his heart still keeps. His 6-year-old daughter, Julie, holding his hand on the way to school, the way she skipped every third step, how she always touched the oak tree at the corner for luck. The next time Julie visits, he doesn't recognize her face, but when she takes his hand, his fingers curled into the same gentle hold from those long-ago walks. I learned some memories live in those places which reside deeper than thoughts. Rose Jenkins calls every man who enters her room Robert. The staff say it was her husband's name. They were married 63 years. She doesn't remember that he died last spring. Robert, she asked each morning, reaching for the empty side of her bed, are you making coffee? In her dreams, I find no clear memories of Robert's face, but there is the feeling of him everywhere, the way he hummed while making coffee, how his weight shifted on the mattress, the sound of his laugh. I gather these fragments like precious stones. Now when she reaches for the empty side of her bed, she smiles. Time and place slip through her fingers like morning mist, but her heart remembers the love. I hear the staff talking about me. Some have noticed how residents sleep more peacefully when I'm nearby, and how sometimes after I spent the night on someone's bed, the morning brings a small miracle or two. The staff just chalked it up to animal therapy, but they don't see the healing that flows through my fur like starlight. They don't see how I collect the precious fragments of love and piece them back together in their dreams. Dawn approaches now. Soon, the day shift will arrive with their charts and medications. They'll find me curled up at the nurse's station. I'm just another therapy cat taking a break from my duties. Somewhere in this building, someone is dreaming of yellow dresses, of spiders spinning words, of morning walks in coffee cups, and love that outlasts memory. I'll be there, gathering those precious fragments, helping hearts remember what minds have forgotten. That's the gift I was given. Not 9 lives, just the one, but one with the power to walk through 1,000 memories. My next couple of pieces are all very short. So I have a very short story by David Pahor. It's called Lattices of Yearning. At the end, you should find your first love. Now, this is a science fiction story. She courts me with her smile across the EM spectrum, her laughter trickling into subspace, the quickening of her antimatter flux trembling her curvaceous hull of gleaming plasteel. Catch me if you can, she croons, unfolding space and disappearing at a brief burst of gamma rays. She catches me off guard as I clumsily spin up my own antimatter drive, but as I have mentioned, I like them fast. Beyond the Tannhauser Gate, my AM drive hums as I ferry spies, bombs, and contraband up and down the arm, effectually silent and swift. For all that, my heart is heavy, and my quantum-entangled lattices listless among the uncaring currents of space. It is a century since she went on the deep recon mission beyond the enemy's suns. The day and the millisecond I last gazed at her unfolded frame of virgin plastisteel are etched indelibly in my journal memory. There were whispers here and rumors there on the ship's subspace grapevine, and at ports and dockings in between missions and jigs with death. The sighting was recounted by an old Navy AM tanker who had to stop for repairs at a neutral habitat near the faraway Bester star. His telemetry showed a familiar shape, scarred by decades of combat and neglect, yet quietly proud, her imperial markings erased by the freebooter outfit that commandeered her. My lattices undulate with hope as I sprint towards her in myriad space, a deserter without a crew, but with a full tank of AM and dozens of appropriated nano-singularity missiles. Nothing matters any longer, except to save her before I die. Now, I have a short little poem that's appropriate for this time of year. And it's called Little Snowflake's Journey. It was written by somebody who calls themselves Moon and Sun. Now, I read something from these folks before, and now we have another one. High above the winter sky, in a quiet and chilly cloud, a little snowflake named Melik was formed. She was tiny and delicate, with 6 perfect icy arms that sparkled like diamonds. Melik had heard stories from the older snowflakes about the beautiful world below. She dreamed of floating down to see it for herself. One chilly morning, Melik felt a gentle breeze lift her from the cloud. It was time for her journey. As she drifted down, she looked around in wonder. The sky was a soft gray, and below her the world was covered in a blanket of white snow. Trees stood tall, wearing coats of frost, and houses had little puffs of smoke coming from their chimneys. "How beautiful," Melik whispered, spinning slowly in the air. She passed other snowflakes on their way down, all dancing and twirling like her. As she floated closer to the ground, she saw a group of children building a snowman. They were laughing and throwing snowballs at each other. Melik thought they looked like they were having so much fun. "I wonder where I'll land," she thought. The wind carried her gently toward a small garden where a single red rose was peeking out from under the snow. Melik felt herself being drawn to the flower and landed softly on one of its petals. The rose was cold, but still so beautiful, with its red petals glowing against the white snow. Melik smiled. "I think I have found a perfect place to rest." She stayed on the rose petal, watching the children play and the world around her sparkle in the winter sun. As the day turned to evening, the sky blushed pink and orange, and Melik knew she had found her special place in the world. Even though she was just one tiny snowflake, she felt happy to be part of the winter's magic. And so the little snowflake named Melik stayed with the rose, a sweet reminder of the beauty that can be found even on the coldest days. And lastly, I have a poem from Mariana Bosarova, published in Catharsis Chronicles, entitled Irrational Confessions. Your touch ignites me. Perhaps I'm selfish, but I miss you still. When silence in my soul begins to roar, when rain cascades upon the windowsill, and when the strongest wind is in my core. Perhaps it's selfish, longing for an embrace, to yearn for you so strongly all the time. I rewrite memories, yet through their trace, your warmth returns within my hands to climb. And then it's reckless, madness pure and wild. But I'm a string, and for you still I play. Life wraps me tight, fervent and beguiled, yet I desire a different world so far away. A world where I'm in your arms. We laugh, we talk, we listen, or just stay. Each night you greet me, drawn by tender charms, with loosened hair, no makeup, not even a shade. Your lips, a sweetness I can't help but drink. Your touch ignites me, searching as it roams. I rest my face where your heartbeat lets me sink, safe in your chest, so close it feels like home. Perhaps it's selfish to seek you here and there, behind a word, a sigh, a fleeting line. In shattered dreams the dawn breaks, unaware, yet even hidden, I still claim that you're mine. So let me stay selfish, reckless and undone, with words that linger, ordered yet unread. They feel like final verses, meant for none, a simple couplet wept and softly bled. So that's what I have for stories and poem, and the last one, a poem. I hope you enjoyed everything. So I wish to thank everyone for joining me today, and I hope you return again next week for who knows what. Sláinte. Groma Haggett. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed the variety of stories and poems again this week. If you like the show and are listening to it on YouTube, please like and subscribe or reply, as this goes a long ways towards reaching more people in the world. This is Shawnee. I hope you will allow me to continue delighting you with a story or poem here under the village oak tree. Maybe they'll bring you a smile and take you away from your troubles for a time. As I say goodbye this week, I wish to leave you with this Irish blessing as you go about your day. May the coming new year bring you and yours health and prosperity. God knows we'll all need it for every bit we can get. Slán go foill.